Welcome to Gary's Hobby Studio. In this video, I'm going to explain to you why you should update your BIOS and your drivers for your computer, especially just after you get a new computer. First, we're going to go over the BIOS. The BIOS is what actually kickstarts the system. When you turn it on and you see the Lenovo or Dell or HP or whoever the manufacturer is, whether it's for the motherboard because you custom built one or it's for your laptop. You definitely want to update the BIOS for multiple reasons. Number one, it squashes bugs. I know lately there have been Intel bugs that will allow, there's serious critical design flaws. The BIOS updates have been mitigating those, which is great because it'll extend the life of your machine. There's also other bugs too. Sometimes BIOS will eventually start to hang the machine where it's just a black screen. Once you can get it up and running, you update the BIOS. Sometimes it can take it away. I recommend that you update it anytime there's a new one, because like I said, it's going to squash bugs. It may create bugs, but usually by the time the machine is pretty much at its end of life, the majority of the bugs in the BIOS should be eliminated. There might be some that may never show up, or they may just be a minor nuisance, but I want to say, on a whole, for a couple of machines that I have currently, I want to say about 90%, maybe 95% of the bugs are pretty much eliminated in the BIOS. If there are still bugs in it, I haven't seen them yet. I have a W540 that hasn't had a BIOS update in a while. I have a X201 that's had its last BIOS update like a while ago, and it's an really old machine. It's still working fine. I run Debian 10.3 on it just because it's a smaller, lighter weight computer. But you definitely need to do that, because I'll give you for instance, there was a BIOS update that was released for my W540 a while ago. For some reason, all of a sudden my external monitor wouldn't turn on. I ran the Lenovo system check. I figured it could be a driver update or something like that, because Lenovo has a program called Lenovo System Update, and it will go out and fetch all the updates and everything. I ran it. There was a BIOS update. Problem solved. Now my monitor comes on. I can take it and drop it on the docking station and it'll come on. It was having problems with that. I had to shut it off and turn it back on to get it to work. So that's one thing. I've had driver updates to fix a lot of problems with NVIDIA drivers, because the W540 has a Quadro graphics chip in it. So you also want to update drivers too, because there's bugs in drivers. Everything's made by human beings, and we are all flawed. There is no question in my mind. We are all flawed in one way or another. Plus, not only that, there was I saw a video for an upgrade on a Lenovo T420 that could give you, because currently the supported chipset or the supported CPUs from Lenovo support a 2-core processor. It's from an i3 to an i7, but they're only 2 cores, gives you 4 threads. There was a video I saw on YouTube about you could put a certain processor in that'll give you 4 cores, 8 threads, which would be great, better performance. You'd be able to run virtual machines. I'm sure the graphics card is a little better, because I don't think it's built into that. I want to say I would have to look up that model. Yeah, I can do it because I have a laptop in front of me while my 540 is over there on my desk, recording this as I'm doing it. Let's see. On Google Doc. So getting there, just taking me a little bit. Okay, here we go. So I found the Google Doc I made. it's an i7 27, or I mean, it's an i7 2670 QM. Q is in Queen, M is in Mary. If I search for that on Google, it'll pull up the arcintel.com, because it'll give you the specs of the chip on there. Let me scroll down. Let's see. Okay, the graphics processor is a HD Graphics 3000. Now, it could still be the same. Let me try to pull up my current machine and see what processor is in it. Never, ever works the way I want it to. Here we go, about map. That should tell me. Nope, that didn't tell me either. All right. Let's see. Monitor. Here we go. Sorry, wrong thing. System. Okay, it's a 2620M. Let's see. That was an i7 2620M. i7 20M. I do have a. So its processor. So what graphics chip in? Okay, so it has the same. It has the same graphics chip set built into the processor. So I'm not really upgrading much as far as graphics performance-wise, but I am upgrading the actual processor to give me more cores, more threads, and it may help process things easier, like using OBS Studio on it, just stuff like that. So that is... But basically, the video that I saw, the guy put in the processor. It had the very first BIOS when the machine was built, so it hasn't even been updated. It would not fire up because of the CPU. He actually had to take the CPU out, put the old one back in, then he was able to update it. Then he could put the new one in and it would start to run. This already has the latest one, because I believe it's either 1.59 or 1.52. I can't remember. I can check on Lenovo's site. But this way, if you update the BIOS, it'll fix bugs, and it may even enable processor upgrades as long as they're within the same similar like chipset, like processor family. So it just depends on what they do. Because, I mean, they could have put this processor in like a T420S or a T420i, but and really the only difference is just the form factor, or whatever features that they decided to either add or omit between the models. Because a 420 is different than a 420S and a 420. Let's see, where processor, because I don't have this connected to my thing, or I show you what I'm doing. I have to figure out how to do that. But the BIOS update, and this machine's so old that it supports. Now the weird thing is the BIOS update supports 420 and a 420i, and it was 1.52, and that was released in 2018. So with this update, I can at least put that new processor in. I can get 4 cores, 8 threads. I can do a little more. I have a little more horsepower. I think it might even be a little faster. The specs of the speed. Base processor frequency for this 2620, which is currently what's in this machine, is 2.7 gigahertz. Turbo frequency max is 3.4. The 2670, find it. Did you go? Okay, here we go. Now it runs a little slower. It does run a little slower. The 2670 runs at 2.2 gigahertz, and its turbo frequency is 3.10. But you also have 2 extra cores that can run 4 extra threads, as opposed to the other one that only has 2 cores okay, and can only run 4 threads. So you're getting a little bit of speed reduction, but you're getting processing capability. So I want to say that in thermal, yeah, it's 10 extra watts for the 2670. So without that BIOS update, and if you don't update it, but you want to do that, you're going to have problems being able to do that. So I always recommend that you do update the BIOS. It will support maybe newer processors that are within that same family that can be run on that hardware, and also it'll provide stability, maybe even better performance. So you're going to get an increase in that. Now, that's on the BIOS side, and that's for the hardware itself inside the machine. Now you want to look at the software, especially with Windows. Windows has bugs like you would not believe. It has more bugs than a bait store, and it really does. There's always operating system bugs. You know, if you've ever seen Patch Tuesday, whenever Microsoft releases it, like once a week or once a month or whatever, it's like it's like a gigabyte in size, and it takes forever to download everything. And you should have seen, because where I work, we rolled out Surfaces, and oh my god, those things constantly needed updated for drivers, for video problems, wireless problems, all kinds of stuff. And you know, you get frustrated at your machine because it's not working, but it's just due to either that the Windows software needs to be updated or the drivers need to be updated. So what do? I say do both. Hit the Windows update first. Get Windows updated and patched up. Not only will it may help the performance, it'll squash out any kind of bugs that are giving you error messages. It'll also take care of security holes in the operating system so that it'll keep people from being able to hack into your system. It may even provide enhancements and new features. Just depends on what Microsoft's rolling out. So hit Windows first, especially if it's a Microsoft-made device like a Surface, Surface Pro, Surface Tablet, Surface Book, anything that's made by Microsoft. You may have to, besides hit the check Windows Update button, you might have to click the link that says, you know, check for updates from Microsoft, because there's like a little like web link underneath where it says check now in the Windows updates, Windows 10. That there will search, because I know that's how I did it with like any of the Surface stuff, and then it was downloading like, you know, firmware for the Surface. Was downloading the drivers for the graphics, the wireless drivers, and stuff like that. And I know what probably most people are thinking, well, why doesn't Windows Update download the drivers and everything for you? That's not Microsoft's responsibility. That's the hardware manufacturers, whether it's HP, Dell, Lenovo, Acer. You know, they have to come up with the drivers because they're tweaking it, because they're either buying reference boards from Intel and then they're tweaking it and adding hardware, or, you know, whatever the case may be. But they have to tweak the driver so that it says Acer, and it only works with Acer. You can't use a Dell driver that has the same hardware on an Acer, and vice versa. You can't use an Acer driver on a Dell and expect it to work. Even though it's the same hardware, there might be some slight hardware revisions, like, you know, this could be an 802.11 or, you know, an 8211 G, you know, USB chip, but it's revision 1, and Acer has the 8211G revision 2, and so the drivers are going to be tweaked a little different because the hardware is a little different. Or it could be the same, and they just, you know, and they whitelist and blacklist drivers and stuff like that. So you definitely want to. It's not Microsoft's responsibility to take care of the drivers for other people's hardware. That's what their tech support's for, and stuff like that. And that's why you buy their products, because then you go to their site to get it fixed, whether it's Lenovo, Asus for, you know, motherboards and hardware to build your own machines, or even if you buy one of their machines. So always, you know, go to the manufacturer's website. I know on most laptops they gridlock certain drivers, but like your graphics card drivers, you don't have to use the ones that they do. You can go to like NVIDIA. If it has an NVIDIA chipset of some type, whether it's an RTX or a Quadro, You can also go to AMD's site because they also make mobile chipsets and graphics cards since they bought out ATI. Really don't like the .NET framework controlling drivers because that's just a whole other big bag of bloat that I don't want to deal with. It's kind of why I lean towards NVIDIA. But anyways, you go to AMD's site, you download the drivers that match for your chipset in a laptop or graphics card if it's a desktop. You download the drivers, you install them, and like I said, it'll improve performance in your games, video editing, or just maybe make it where it doesn't crash as often or even at all. Because I've seen badly written drivers crash software because it starts getting intense and everything, and the software is just written badly. But that's one way of doing it. So that's what I recommend. I recommend always hit the Windows updates first, then go to your manufacturer's website and get the drivers. It's just way easier that way. Like I said, it will squash all kinds of bugs. Like I said, by the time the life of the machine's done and the manufacturer doesn't support it, I think it's getting the same way with the NVIDIA drivers for my W540 because it has a 100, say. Can't remember exactly, but I do want to say it's a K2100. I know my new work laptop has the M2200, which I'm looking forward to buying out that least. I hope it's not that expensive because it's a really nice laptop and I'm really going to like it. I just don't know. It's weird. And it really is. I gotta scroll. Yeah, I think it's the K2100M that's the chipset in it. And, ooh, it looks like they did update it. Holy crap. Nice. I got new drivers to update. But that's what you gotta do. You gotta keep checking, because eventually they do stop supporting it, and I do need to check and see if that's what that chipset is on this machine, because really weird that it was updated before. But then again, it could be taking a while because, like I said, it is an older chipset. The laptop's actually coming up on 6 years because we replace our machines every 3 years, and which is nice because this way we don't have a stockpile of old hardware. And not only that, but we're getting new PCs every 3 years. And by the time 3 years, it's pretty much hit its lifespan. I'm still waiting for the control panel to show up. But if this is correct, I have new graphics card drivers, which may also help the performance in OBS Studio, DaVinci Resolve, because I do run that on my... and I know what you're thinking, what the heck's he doing? Because he's leaning, and it's like, yeah, because I have to see, and I have to see around my microphone because it's kind of in the way, and I have a very small... Yeah, it's a K2100M. Which is exactly what I selected. So that's awesome that I can update it. And as you can tell, I'm excited because the fact is hopefully it's going to squash a lot of bugs in it. And I know eventually at some point support is going to end for this. Not exactly sure when, but I'll keep updating it until they stop making drivers for it. And then after that, I will probably... I'm going to switch it over to Linux anyway, to like Debian that I've been running on a couple of other machines. I like it. Definitely not Windows. I definitely can't do everything I can on Windows as I can on, or I can't do everything on Debian as I can do on Windows, which is the sad part of it. There's some things that I can, some things that I can't. But yeah. So that's my explanation on updating your BIOS, updating your drivers. If you update this stuff, it will definitely help the performance, fix a lot of problems. I'm not going to say it's not going to introduce new ones, because it will, but at least it'll help mitigate a lot of them. But that's what I recommend. Always run Windows updates. Go to your manufacturer's website. If you run a Lenovo, if you just type in a Google search or MSN search, depending upon which search engine that you use, type in Lenovo System Update. It'll take you to the page, download the latest version, install it on any of your Lenovo machines, and then just run it periodically. It will pull down any and all firmware that needs updated, any and all drivers that need updated. Maybe even some Windows patches too, because it has 3 different tabs: critical, recommended, and optional. I want to say. I know it's critical and recommended. I think it is optional. And the one thing I do have to let you know, when you, especially for the Lenovo's, not so much some of the other ones, because I haven't really worked with, I don't know if Dell has a program that will pull down the downloads for you and install them for you. I know Lenovo does, which is really nice, especially on Windows. It doesn't work on Debian or anything like that. But if you have multiple firmwares, like you have the BIOS, you have Thunderbolt, you have the Synaptics trackpad firmware, any and all firmwares, uncheck all of them and just do them one at a time. You can do all the drivers with a single firmware, because it'll do all the drivers first. When it hits the BIOS or firmware, it'll do that last, and then because no matter where it is in the list, that's how it does. Drivers, then firmware. Once it's done, it'll reboot. If it's any other firmware, if it's the BIOS, it'll install, restart the system, update it on, because it'll say it's going to update, and click, it's going to restart to update. Click yes, it'll shut down, start up, update the BIOS for the computer, restart again, come back up, you log in, and then you can go back into it and then just do the other firmwares. But again, do them one at a time, because what will happen is if you have all of them listed, it's only going to do one, restart the machine, and then there's the rest of them. Where if you do all the drivers, one of the firmwares, whether it's the BIOS, Thunderbolt, whatever it says, blah, 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 firmware, that way you can get that done bit at a time. Like I said, it's really nice when there's a utility that can pull that down. I'm going to say HP has one. Can't remember what it's called, but I know Lenovo has one. It's really nice, Lenovo System Update. I think HP has one. Not sure about Dell or any other manufacturer. Some BIOS updates you actually have to put on a flash drive, plug it in, start the machine up, and go into the BIOS and then select update firmware. I have a couple of motherboards over here that I can flash it through the BIOS. I don't have to run it. They don't make a runnable utility from within Windows, which is good, because sometimes Windows isn't that stable. And also, anytime the firmware is being updated on these machines, try to make sure that the computer doesn't get unplugged from power, because it can brick the machine. Laptops, it's not so hard to do, just because of the fact they have a battery in it. But this is more for desktops. If you have a battery backup UPS that sits on the floor and it's plugged into, that'll help, because if the power does go out, it'll still continue to flash. Hopefully before that battery goes dead, the power will come back on. But yeah, try to be careful not to jerk the power cord or anything out on a desktop. Laptop, like I said, got a built-in battery. Unless your battery's really bad, you should be able to update it, and that'll be that. So that's my strong recommendations. Like I said, you do that, should mitigate a good majority of issues out there. Like I said, I'm not going to say new ones won't pop up, because they will. It's written by humans. But you'll at least avoid the majority. So I hope this helps. If you have any other questions or comments or anything, please feel free to leave them in the comments below. Also, again, if you like what I'm doing, please like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon, select all, and as I always say, have a good day.